My stepson demanded his inheritance early, screaming, "Give me my money now or you'll never see me again." I calmly signed the papers. What he didn't know was that I'd already changed my will after discovering he'd been stealing from me for months, and his early inheritance was actually just the $47 he had left in his account after I'd recovered of everything else. When he called crying 2 weeks later begging to come back, I simply said, "You got exactly what you asked for." When I married David 8 years ago, I knew I was getting more than just a husband. His son Marcus was 14 at the time, angry about his parents' divorce and skeptical of any woman trying to replace his mother. I understood his hesitation. Blending families is never easy, and I was determined to be patient, supportive, and never overstep my boundaries. David and I had met through mutual friends at a book club. He was this gentle, intelligent man who worked as a financial advisor and loved discussing philosophy over wine. His ex-wife Rebecca had left him for her personal trainer 3 years earlier, taking half of everything and moving to another state. She maintained minimal contact with Marcus, sending birthday cards and the occasional text, but David was essentially raising his son alone. From the beginning, I tried to be the supportive adult figure Marcus needed without trying to be his mother. I helped with homework when asked, drove him to soccer practice when David was working late, and always made sure his favorite snacks were in the house. Marcus was polite but distant, which I expected. I figured time and consistency would help us build a relationship. The first few years were actually pretty good. Marcus gradually warmed up to me, started including me in conversations, and even asked for advice about school drama occasionally. When he was 17, he actually thanked me for helping him with his college applications. "I know you didn't have to do all this," he said one evening while we reviewed his essays. "But I appreciate it. You're not so bad for a stepmother." I was touched. It felt like we'd finally turned a corner. David had always been generous with Marcus, maybe overcompensating for the guilt he felt about the divorce. When Marcus got his license, David bought him a used BMW. When he wanted to go on expensive school trips, David found the money. When Marcus expressed interest in attending an out-of-state private college that cost $60,000 a year, David took out loans to make it happen. I supported all of this. David's relationship with his son was important to me, and I understood his desire to provide opportunities he'd never had. We lived comfortably on our combined incomes. David's financial planning business was successful, and my job as a hospital administrator paid well, but we weren't wealthy by any means. The first red flag came during Marcus's sophomore year of college. David was reviewing our finances and noticed some unusual charges on our joint credit card. Expensive dinners at restaurants near Marcus's campus, purchases at high-end electronics stores, and charges from luxury clothing brands that we definitely hadn't made. When David called Marcus about it, he had explanations for everything. He'd borrowed the card for a family emergency when his debit card was compromised. He'd had to take potential internship contacts out for business dinners. He'd needed a new laptop for his advanced computer science classes. The explanations were plausible enough that David accepted them, though he reminded Marcus to ask permission before using our cards in the future. But the charges kept appearing. Over the next year, I estimated Marcus had spent nearly $8,000 on our credit cards without permission. Each time David confronted him, Marcus had increasingly elaborate explanations or would get defensive and accuse us of not trusting him. "You know what, David," I said one evening after we discovered another $500 in unauthorized charges, "maybe we should consider cutting him off financially for a while. Let him learn to manage money on his own." David looked at me like I'd suggested abandoning Marcus on a mountaintop. "I can't do that to him. College is stressful enough without worrying about money. Besides, he's young. He'll learn." I didn't push it. Marcus was David's son, and I promised myself I wouldn't create conflict between them. But privately, I was growing concerned about the pattern of behavior I was seeing. Things escalated during Marcus's junior year. He called David one evening in tears, claiming his roommate had stolen money from him and he couldn't afford groceries. David immediately transferred $1,000 to his account. 2 weeks later, I saw Marcus's Instagram stories showing him at an expensive resort in Cabo with friends, clearly having spent spring break there instead of at the volunteer program he'd told us about. When I showed David the photos, he made excuses. Maybe his friends paid for the trip. Maybe he had scholarship money we didn't know about. But I'd had enough. I started doing some investigating on my own. I discovered that Marcus had opened 3 credit cards using our address as his permanent residence, had been getting financial aid under false pretenses by claiming he received no family support, and had even taken out a personal loan using David's business as a reference without David's knowledge. The most devastating discovery came when I was helping David organize his office files. I found paperwork showing that Marcus had somehow gained access to David's business account and had been making small withdrawals, $200 here, $500 there, for months. The total was over $15,000. When I showed David the evidence, he sat in stunned silence for a long time. "There has to be an explanation," he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. We called Marcus that night. David, his voice shaking with emotion, laid out everything we'd discovered. Marcus's response was immediate and aggressive. "How dare you spy on me?" he shouted through the phone. "You don't trust me at all. And you," he said, clearly addressing me even though David was holding the phone, "you've been trying to turn my dad against me since day one. You're not even my real family." David tried to calm him down, but Marcus was just getting started. "I can't believe you'd rather believe her than your own son." "Fine. If that's how you want it, I don't need either of you. I have friends, I have other family. You'll never see me again." He hung up. David was devastated. For weeks, he tried calling and texting Marcus, but got no response. I felt terrible seeing my husband in so much pain, but I also felt vindicated that Marcus's true character was finally being revealed. Then, about a month later, Marcus called back. But he wasn't calling to apologize. "I've been thinking," he said when David answered, "and I've decided what needs to happen. I want my inheritance early." David was confused. "What inheritance?" "The money you're leaving me in your will. I want it now. I'm tired of having to beg for money for school and living expenses. Just give me what's mine and we can all move on with our lives." I was listening from the kitchen, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. David tried to explain that inheritances don't work that way, that the money was tied up in investments and retirement accounts, and that he and I needed those funds for our own future. Marcus's response was chilling. "I don't care about your future. I'm your son. That money should be mine anyway. If you really cared about me, you'd find a way." Over the next several weeks, Marcus called repeatedly with the same demand. Each conversation became more aggressive. He'd researched David's assets online and had calculated what he thought he was owed. He wanted $200,000 immediately. "Give me my money now," he said during one particularly heated call, "or you'll never see me again. I have real family who actually care about me, not like you two." David was torn apart by these conversations. He'd lie awake at night wondering if he was being selfish, if he should find a way to give Marcus what he wanted. I watched my kind, generous husband second-guess every decision he'd ever made as a father. That's when I decided to do some more investigating. I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do in my life, to look into Marcus's recent activities. What we discovered was eye-opening. Marcus had been living far beyond any reasonable means for a college student. He'd moved off campus into a luxury apartment, was driving a brand new Mercedes that he'd somehow financed, and was regularly posting on social media about expensive vacations and shopping sprees. He'd also been telling people that his father was wealthy and would be giving him access to his trust fund soon. But the most disturbing discovery was that Marcus had been researching David's will and our financial accounts. He'd somehow obtained copies of confidential documents and had been discussing with friends how much money he'd inherit and when. The private investigator also uncovered something else. Marcus had been in contact with his mother Rebecca, who had apparently been encouraging his demands for early inheritance. She'd been telling him that David owed him this money because of the trauma of the divorce. Armed with this information, I sat down with David and laid everything out. "Your son isn't just asking for help," I said gently. "He's planning to take everything we've worked for, and he's being coached by his mother to do it." David stared at the evidence for a long time. Bank records showing unauthorized access to his accounts, social media posts where Marcus bragged about his upcoming windfall, and recorded phone conversations where Rebecca encouraged him to get what's rightfully yours before that woman convinces your father to leave it all to her. "What do I do?" David asked, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "We protect ourselves," I said. "And we teach Marcus a lesson about consequences." That's when we came up with our plan. First, David called his attorney and made some changes to his will. Instead of the substantial inheritance Marcus was expecting, David left him a token amount, enough to show he hadn't been forgotten, but not enough to fund the lifestyle Marcus was planning. Next, we opened a new checking account and transferred $47 into it, the exact amount that Marcus had left in his original savings account after we'd recovered all the money he'd stolen from us over the years. Then we waited for his next call. It came on a Tuesday evening. Marcus was more aggressive than ever. "I'm done playing games," he said. "I want my money now, or you'll never see me again. I have real family who actually care about me, not like you people. Transfer $200,000 to my account by Friday, or I'm done with both of you forever." David looked at me, took a deep breath, and said, "You know what, Marcus? You're right. You should have your inheritance." Marcus was clearly surprised by the change in tone. "Really? Really? I'm tired of fighting about this. If having the money is more important to you than having a relationship with me, then you should have it." Finally, Marcus said, I knew you'd see reason. I'll need a few days to liquidate some investments, David continued, but I can have money transferred to you by Friday. How much? Marcus asked. Your full inheritance. Everything you're entitled to receive from me. Marcus was practically gloating. Good. It's about time. After he hung up, David and I spent the evening preparing everything. David's attorney drew up papers showing that Marcus was receiving his full inheritance early, which he would need to sign to receive the money. The papers were legally binding and stated that by accepting this early inheritance, Marcus was waiving all rights to any future claims on David's estate. Friday came, and David called Marcus. Your inheritance is ready. I need you to sign some paperwork first, standard legal stuff to protect both of us. Can you meet me at my lawyer's office? Marcus was there within 2 hours, practically bouncing with excitement. He barely read the papers before signing them, too focused on the money he thought he was about to receive. So how much is it? He asked as he handed back the signed documents. Exactly what you're entitled to, David said. He handed Marcus a cashier's check. Marcus looked at the check and his face went white. $47? What the hell is this? That's your inheritance, David said calmly. After we recovered all the money you stole from us over the past 2 years, that's what was left in your original savings account. That money has always been yours, so technically, that's your inheritance from me. This is bullshit. Marcus screamed. You can't do this to me. Actually, I can, David replied. You just signed papers waiving all rights to my estate in exchange for receiving your inheritance early. You got exactly what you asked for. But I meant the real money. The investments, the house, everything. David's attorney spoke up. The papers you signed are very clear. You've received your inheritance and waived all future claims. This transaction is complete and legally binding. Marcus turned to David, his face red with rage. You can't be serious. I'm your son. Yes, you are my son, David said, and for the first time in months, his voice was steady and strong. Which is why it breaks my heart that you chose money over having a relationship with me. But you made that choice, Marcus. You told me repeatedly that if I didn't give you money, you'd never see me again. You told me you had real family who cared about you. So go to them. I didn't mean it like that, Marcus protested, but David was already standing up. You meant exactly what you said. And now you have what you wanted. You have your inheritance, and you don't have to deal with us anymore. Marcus tried arguing, pleading, and eventually threatening, but the paperwork was ironclad. He'd legally received his inheritance and waived all future claims. There was nothing more to discuss. As David and I left the attorney's office, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for David, who'd lost his son to greed and manipulation. Relief that we'd finally stood up for ourselves and protected our future. For 2 weeks, we heard nothing from Marcus. David was heartbroken but resolute. I raised him better than this, he said one evening. If money is more important to him than family, then I failed somewhere along the way. You didn't fail, I assured him. You loved him and provided for him. He made his own choices. Then, on a Thursday evening, David's phone rang. It was Marcus, and he was crying. Dad, I'm so sorry, he sobbed. I made a terrible mistake. I didn't mean any of those things I said. Please, can we talk? Can I come home? David looked at me, pain evident in his eyes. Marcus, you made your choice. You told me money was more important than family. But I was wrong. I was stupid and selfish, and I'm sorry. Please, Dad. I need you. What you need, David said quietly, is to learn that actions have consequences. You chose money over family, and now you have to live with that choice. But I love you, Marcus pleaded. You're my father. Yes, I'm your father. And because I love you, I'm not going to enable your behavior anymore. You stole from me, lied to me, and told me you never wanted to see me again unless I gave you money. Those were your choices, and now you have to live with them. Marcus tried every manipulation tactic he could think of. He blamed his mother for giving him bad advice. He claimed he'd been under stress and hadn't meant what he'd said. He promised he'd changed and would never ask for money again. But David held firm. You got exactly what you asked for, Marcus. You wanted your inheritance early, and you got it. You wanted to be free from having to deal with us, and now you are. I hope you find happiness with your real family. When Marcus realized that tears and apologies weren't working, he got angry again. Fine. Keep your stupid money. I don't need you anyway. I'm glad to hear that, David replied calmly. Because you signed legal documents saying you'd never get any of it anyway. That was 6 months ago. We've heard through mutual friends that Marcus dropped out of college and moved back in with his mother Rebecca. Apparently, she's not as financially supportive as he'd hoped, and he's been working at a fast food restaurant to pay for his expensive lifestyle choices. We also heard that he'd been telling people we'd tricked him and stolen his inheritance. But since he'd signed legal documents in front of witnesses and his own demands were well documented, most people saw through his version of events. David struggled with guilt for months, wondering if he'd been too harsh. But our marriage counselor helped him understand that enabling Marcus's behavior would have been far more harmful in the long run. "You taught him that his choices have consequences," she told David. "That's one of the most important lessons a parent can teach." As for me, I learned something important too. I'd spent years trying to be the perfect stepmother, walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. But sometimes love requires setting boundaries, even when it's painful. David and I are closer than ever now. We've started traveling more, something we'd have always put off because we were so focused on supporting Marcus. We've also started volunteering with financial literacy programs, helping young adults learn to manage money responsibly. Recently, we heard that Marcus has been asking mutual friends about the possibility of reconciling with his father. I suspect his financial situation has become more desperate than he'd anticipated. But David has made peace with his decision. "I'll always love him," he told me recently. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse or manipulation. I hope someday he'll understand that. I think about Marcus sometimes and feel a mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness for the opportunities he threw away and the pain he caused his father. Hope that someday he'll mature enough to understand the difference between love and enablement. The money he demanded so desperately? We've put it toward our retirement and some charitable donations. We're planning a trip to Europe next spring, something we'd always dreamed of but never felt we could afford because we were constantly supporting Marcus's expensive lifestyle. I've learned that being a step-parent doesn't mean accepting poor treatment in the name of keeping peace. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being to avoid being labeled the evil stepmother. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. David's attorney called last week to let us know that Marcus had contacted his office, asking about the possibility of reviewing the inheritance paperwork. The attorney told him what we'd expected: the documents were legally binding and there was nothing to review. When David told me about the call, he just shook his head and smiled sadly. He still doesn't get it. He's still thinking about money instead of relationships. That evening, David updated his will one final time. The substantial inheritance that had originally been designated for Marcus is now going to scholarships for underprivileged students who demonstrate both academic merit and strong character. "Maybe some good can come from all of this," David said as he signed the new documents. "I think Marcus could still have a relationship with his father if he wanted one. But it would require genuine remorse, real change, and an understanding that love can't be bought or demanded. It would require him to value the relationship more than the money." So far, he's shown no signs of that understanding. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about the role I played in Marcus's estrangement from his father. The honest answer is no. I feel sad about how things turned out, but not guilty. Marcus made his choice when he decided that money was more important than family. He chose greed over love, manipulation over honesty, and entitlement over gratitude. Those were his decisions, and we simply stopped enabling them. David gave his son every opportunity to choose differently. Even at the end, if Marcus had shown genuine remorse and a willingness to change, I believe David would have found a way to rebuild their relationship. But you can't force someone to love you more than they love money. And you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. The $47 inheritance wasn't really about the money. It was about teaching Marcus that his choices have consequences, that relationships require mutual respect, and that love can't be taken for granted. Whether he ever learns those lessons remains to be seen. But David and I have learned something too, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses, even when that someone is family. Marcus got exactly what he asked for. The tragedy is that he asked for the wrong thing.